Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. The blackout technique using embossing folders has definitely been one of the most popular trends this year, and I have to admit, it's one of my personal favorites too. I just love how it transforms almost any embossing folder into something truly stunning. Today, as we celebrate the brand new and everything nice release from Simon's Stamp, I couldn't resist reaching for this absolutely gorgeous branching holly embossing folder from the collection. I'll be using it to share this beautiful blackout technique with you all, so let's jump right in. Let's first take a look at this absolutely gorgeous embossing folder. It's called Branching Holly. Now, this is a 3D embossing folder that features those beautiful shrub details, including the prickly holly leaves and the red berries. If you look closely, you'll also notice the delicate, intricate texture on the branches. It's absolutely stunning. Now, even though we are still early in November, this one definitely gives me those festive Christmas vibes, full of color, sparkle, and cheer. To get started, I'll be embossing a white cardstock panel, which is cut to 4 by 5 and quarter inches. Now, whenever I'm using panels with the embossing folder, before running the sandwich through my die cutting machine, I like to lightly mist the paper with water. Now, this helps soften the paper fibers and prevents any cracking as it goes through the die cutting machine. Well, I absolutely love the details on this. Now, here's a closer look at those beautiful, intricate details. They are absolutely stunning. Now, if you're not into the blackout technique, this folder works wonderfully for ink blended backgrounds as well, or even as a simple embossed panel paired with a bold layered focal point. For the blackout technique, we'll be working on the debossed side of the panel. That's the side where the design is pressed into the paper rather than the raised side, which is the embossed side. Now, for this particular technique, you can choose to add color in a few different ways. You could ink blend over the debossed areas using your mini ink blending brushes, or like I'm doing here, you can also use your alcohol markers to color in those etched designs. I'm using my go-to markers, the Ohuhu alcohol markers. Now, this one I have is a smaller 48 color set, but it comes in both brush tip and chisel tip. I'll be using the brush tip to carefully add color to all those beautiful details within the design. The best part about this technique is that you don't have to be super precise with your coloring, and that's honestly what makes it so relaxing and fun to do. No pressure at all. You don't need to worry about staying perfectly inside the lines or making sure that every leaf is shaded just right. Because in the end, once you add that layer of black ink, everything will blend beautifully, and those tiny imperfections will actually add more depth and character to your piece. For my coloring, I'm sticking with the traditional holiday shades, a few rich tones of red for the holly berries, a mix of darker greens for the leaves, and I'll be using a couple of different shades of each of those colors to give a little variation and movement so the overall design does not look very flat. For the branches, I have used a few shades of browns. You'll notice that in some areas the branches are really thin and almost blend into the background. That's totally fine. Don't stress about trying to get every tiny corner or detail. The beauty of this technique is that all of those fine, delicate lines will pop right back into view once we apply the blackout layer. So at this stage, just enjoy adding color to the design. Think of it as a loose, stress-free coloring. There is no right or wrong way to do it. Once you have all your leaves, berries, and branches filled in, we'll move on to the fun part, which is swiping the black ink across the panel to create that dramatic, rich blackout effect that really makes all of those colors shine through. At this stage, your panel might look a little messy, the colors may seem uneven, and the whole design might not make any sense yet. But don't worry, that's completely normal. This is one of those techniques where you really have to trust the process. Right now, you're seeing those scattered pops of color sitting inside the debossed areas, but once we bring in the ink and add the blackout layer over the top, everything will transform beautifully. The design that looks a little untidy at the moment will suddenly come to life with incredible depth and contrast. and it's going to look absolutely gorgeous. Usually, when I'm working on the blackout techniques, I like to use darker shades of ink. It doesn't necessarily have to be black, any deep, rich tone works beautifully for this effect. In the past, I have even tried deep blues and warm browns, and they've looked just as stunning. Now, for this card, I'm bringing my panel over to a scrap piece of paper and I'll be using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink pad to swipe across the surface. Normally, when I do the blackout technique, I like to apply the ink with a heavier hand. That way, I get a nice even layer of dark color all over the panel. But this time, I wanted to do something a little different, so I gave the background a bit more texture and movement instead of that smooth, solid finish. So instead of pressing the ink pad firmly, I'm holding it at a slight angle and gently gliding it over the panel. Now, this creates a more uneven textured look, which adds so much character to this background. Now, if I had chosen a brown ink instead of this black one, the same technique would have created a really beautiful wood grain like effect. So, definitely something you could try if you want a softer, more rustic look. Now, I'm swiping the ink pad just a couple of times, always in one direction to maintain that texture. After the first layer of ink, I noticed a few tiny areas where I had missed some coloring earlier. So I went back in with my alcohol markers to fill in those areas. Once all the spots were touched up, I'll go back one more time with my ink pad and gently swipe across the panel again. This will deepen the color, giving it that rich blackout look, but still keeps that beautiful textured finish intact. I have to say, I'm already in love with this panel. I just adore how each colored area pops so beautifully against that rich textured black background. The contrast is really amazing. Now, what's a festive card without a little shine and sparkle? So, once I was done with swiping my ink pad across the panel, I took the panel over to my splatter box and gave it a generous spray of the silver shimmer mist. This adds the perfect touch of holiday magic, just the right amount of shine and sparkle that catches the light beautifully when you tilt the panel. Now, while the shimmer mist is drying and doing its thing, we will move on to create the sentiment for our card. For my sentiment today, I'll be using the Joy, Word, and Shadow die from the Holiday Duo die set. The set was part of the previous Sugar and Spice release by Simon, and I have to say, I'm absolutely in love with the font of these. Now, these dies are super versatile. You can easily pair them with your favorite stamped images or use them as standalone dies. To add a little shimmer and tie that festive feel, I decided to cut the word joy from silver glitter cardstock by Your Paper Insider. And for my shadow layer, I used vellum, which gives it that soft, airy look while still letting a bit of that background to shine through. Here's a closer look at that absolutely gorgeous, sparkly silver glitter cardstock. Isn't it stunning? I just love how it catches the light and adds that instant festive touch. But once I placed the sentiment over my inked panel, I noticed that it was getting a little lost against that busy textured background. The vellum shadow, while soft and pretty, just didn't give enough contrast for the sentiment to really stand out. So, to fix that, I decided to cut another sentiment, this time changing the shadow layer. Now, instead of vellum, I went with black cardstock for the shadow, and honestly, that small little change made such a big difference. The black cardstock not only helps the silver glitter joy die cut to pop beautifully, but it also anchors the sentiment against that dark background, making it so much more visible and balanced. It's such a simple tweak, but it completely transforms the overall look of our card. I popped up the sentiment piece using foam tape and mounted it right onto my panel. Now that the sentiment was in place, all we had to do is assemble the panel onto an A2 size card base. With all that beautiful texture and dimension, I decided to pop the entire panel as well, so I used foam tape to attach it onto the card base. That way, the panel really stands out and gives the card a nice layered look. At this stage, you could call this card done, but I just couldn't resist adding a little extra shine and sparkle. So I went ahead and grabbed the Prism Positively Dazzling Gems and scattered a few around the sentiment for that festive pop. Then I added some shiny silver stickles to the holly berries to really turn up the holiday vibe. And with that, our card is officially finished. I love how the blackout technique, layered sentiments, and the sparkly accents all came together to create a rich festive design. If you're feeling inspired, I definitely encourage you to try this blackout technique for yourself. It's such a versatile and fun technique, and you can really make it your own with different inks, colors, and embossing folders. Also, don't forget to check out the new and everything nice release at Simon System. There are so many gorgeous products in this collection. Now, all the supplies that I used to create this project will be listed down in the description box below, along with the supplies for the and everything nice release. Now, all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. Do you ever find yourself completely obsessed with a single product and want to use it on every card you make? Well, that's exactly where I am right now. I just can't get enough of that textured tiles 3D embossing folder by Altenew. Today, I'll be sharing two different card projects featuring this gorgeous background. Well, I'm stepping a little out of my comfort zone and bringing in several techniques together. We have stamping, die cutting, embossing, ink blending, you name it, all while staying true to my clean and simple style. This video is part of a YouTube hop, and the theme for this hop is out of my comfort zone. A few of us crafty friends are sharing projects that are completely different from our usual card making style, pushing ourselves to try something new and exciting. I'll have links to all the other participants and their videos down in the description box below, so be sure to check them out for even more creative inspiration. Let's start by taking a look at this absolutely gorgeous textured tiles 3D embossing folder. Now, this folder creates a realistic brick-like texture that adds incredible depth and dimension to your card fronts. If you look closely, you'll notice that each brick has a slightly different design, and the raised pattern perfectly mimics the rugged charm of a brick wall, making it an ideal backdrop for any floral card design. For today's cards, I'll keep the overall design very clean and simple. I'll be embossing two panels, one in white and one in black cardstock for my backgrounds. Let's begin with the white panel. This one measures 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I lightly misted it with water before running it through my die cutting machine. This will help soften the paper fibers and prevent any cracking when embossed. Just take a closer look at how gorgeous this design is. You could definitely add some beautiful ink blending to highlight the texture and patterns even more, but since I wanted to step a little bit out of my comfort zone, I decided to leave it as is. No ink blending, no coloring, no splatters. Now, the main idea behind both the cards today was to create a framed floral element over this beautiful brick background. For the first card, I'm using the Elegant Blossoms Branch die by Simon System. I absolutely love this floral. It's a single die that cuts out that delicate stem with leaves, four petal layers, and a flower center, allowing you to create a beautifully layered floral sprig. You can definitely use colored cardstock for each of those die cut layers, but I prefer cutting mine from plain white cardstock, especially since everything comes in that one die, and then adding colors with inks. Now, once my die cuts were ready, I placed them on my ultra sticky mat by Altenew. This helps keep all the tiny little pieces in place while I ink blend, especially since they are quite delicate and I don't want any tearing or cracking of the paper. As far as colors are concerned, I went with the traditional greens and browns for the leaves and stem, using mocha and cappuccino for the stems and field and pine for the leaves. All of these inks are the Simon Says Positively Saturated inks. Now, normally I would go for pinks, soft pinks for my flowers, but this time I wanted a warm teal shade for which I used color Surf. I felt that it would complement beautifully with that earthy brick background without overpowering it, and it would be a change from the usual pinks and purples that I use for my florals. Now, for adding ink on the flower petals, I started by adding just a light touch of color at the very center of each of those petals, and then using a soft flicking motion, I pull the ink outwards towards the edge. This technique creates a really gentle gradient where the color is most concentrated at the center and gradually fades out to almost white at the tips of the petals. It gives the flowers a soft, airy look that feels very natural and elegant. To do this, I used my mini ink blending brushes, which works perfectly for those small die cut pieces like these. They let me have much more control of how much color I'm adding and exactly where I want it to be. For the flower centers, I wanted to bring in a little contrast and brightness, so I went with the shade Citrine, a cheerful sunny yellow that brings the whole flower to life. Once all of my die cut pieces were inked and dried, I carefully assembled the flowers by layering each of those petals over the other and adhering them together using liquid glue. I love how that slight variation in the ink blending adds depth to each layer, making the finished blooms look soft and dimensional, almost like a real pressed flower. Before adding my frame onto this panel, I wanted to make sure that my floral arrangement would fit perfectly on the card front. This step also helps me determine exactly what size frame I'll need for the design. And I absolutely love how this looks. That beautiful teal, I feel, really pops against this white background. Well, if you wanted, you could also add a hint of color on your background to make that floral element pop. Now for this card, I'll be using the Illuminated Scenes die set, which includes these beautiful decorative frames along with some coordinating sentiments that match perfectly with this Illuminated Scenes stamp set. Now, in one of my previous videos, I had already die cut a few of these frames and even embossed them using the coordinating embossing folder. So I decided to use one of the leftovers today. I will leave a link to that video down in the description box below. Now, this particular one is an absolutely stunning gold frame from using the gold paper by Your Paper Insider. The embossing gives it such a rich, detailed texture that adds a touch of elegance to the whole card. Since I only wanted to highlight my floral element and not the entire background, I decided to go with a smaller frame this time. This helps draw the focus right to the flowers while still letting that beautiful brick texture show through around it. Before adhering everything down, I just double checked that my floral element fit nicely within the frame. Once I was happy with the positioning, I attached the stem to the background using liquid glue, and you'll notice that I intentionally let the bottom of the stem extend slightly outside the frame. That little detail helps create a more natural, dimensional look, almost as if the floral sprig is growing right out of that frame itself. At this point, I decided to make a little change. Now, instead of aligning the frame straight with the background, I tilted it just slightly, and I have to say, I really love how that small shift added a touch of visual interest to the overall design. It's not something I usually do, but this simple tilt really helped draw the eye towards the floral focal point and made the composition feel more dynamic. I adhere the frame onto my 3D texture embossed background using liquid glue. Because the background is quite dimensional, I always make sure to press down gently for a few seconds so the glue gets good contact with those raised areas. Adhering elements on a heavily textured surface can sometimes be a little tricky, but using a strong liquid glue adhesive usually does the job perfectly. Next, I added thin foam tape behind the flowers to give them just a subtle bit of lift. From my experience, foam tape works much better than tape runners or even liquid glue when you're attaching die cuts to embossed or textured panels. It not only helps them stay in place securely, but also adds that lovely dimension to your focal point, making it stand out beautifully against the background. Well, I'm absolutely in love with how that beautiful teal petals look against the brick texture of the background. That soft gradient of surf fading from the center to those outside of the petal with nearly white petal tips gives the flower such a delicate, airy feel. Pairing them up with the deep greens and browns of the leaves and stem adds a really natural, grounded contrast. It's such a subtle contrast, but super elegant. With the flowers popped up, the combination of textures, we have brick embossing, shimmer from the gold frame, and the soft floral, everything gives the card a beautiful layered look without feeling busy. Next, it was time to choose a sentiment for my card front, and for that, I reached out for one of my absolute favorites, the Always and Forever Better Press Sentiments by Spellbinders. I just love this collection because it includes such a beautiful variety of sentiments that work perfectly with so many different occasions. What I especially love about this set is that it comes with a coordinating die that cuts out all the sentiments in one go. For today's card, I decided to use a simple and sweet one which says, Hello, sweet friend. To help it blend beautifully with the rest of the design, I added just a hint of teal ink over the sentiment. I didn't add any fresh ink, I simply used the leftover color that was already on my blending brush. This subtle touch of color helps tie everything together. I absolutely love how the color on my sentiment strip complements with the shades in my flowers. It's such a subtle but effective way to tie the card together. I decided to place a sentiment strip on the lower left hand corner. Since this is a long strip, I positioned it towards the corner and will trim off one end with scissors to make it fit perfectly. Now, to adhere the sentiment, I used foam tape which pops it up to match the exact height of our floral image. This way, it's not just the colors that coordinate but also the dimension, which helps bring the entire design together in a balanced and visually pleasing way. I like to add a tiny bit of liquid glue on top of the foam tape for extra security. Before pressing it down completely, I like to use my T-square ruler to double check that sentiment strip is perfectly aligned on the card front. The liquid glue will give me that wiggle room before I commit the sentiment onto the card front. Taking this extra step ensures a clean, professional looking finish and keeps everything neatly in place. Now that our card front panel is complete, all that is left to do is assemble it onto an A2 size card base. Now, because I used thin foam tape for the flowers and sentiment, I decided to add a little extra foam tape behind the panel to give it a subtle lift and ensure that it stands out nicely from the base. And for just a touch of extra magic, I used my glitter brush pen to add a soft sparkle to the leaves and flowers. It's such a subtle effect, but it catches the light beautifully and really elevates the design without overpowering the clean and simple aesthetic. And well, there you have it, a clean and simple card with a beautiful textured brick background, a softly ink blended floral focal point, and coordinating sentiment. I love how the dimension, colors, and subtle sparkle all come together to create a polished, elegant design. This card is simple yet full of detail and personality, perfect for sending to a special friend. Now, it was at this point that I knew that I had to use this beautiful background panel and the overall design for another card. So I went on to create my second card. For card number two, I'll keep the basic design the same. We have the textured embossed background, a frame floral focal point, and a letterpress sentiment, but with a few subtle changes to give it a fresh look. This time I'm starting with a black cardstock panel for my background, which is something I don't usually use, but trust me, once you see the finished card, you are going to fall in love with it. I began by cutting an A2 size black cardstock panel using A2 postage rectangle die by Simon's Stamp. I absolutely love the little postage style edges on all four sides. It adds such a delicate finished touch to our panel. Next, I place this panel into my textured tiled embossing folder. Well, just like I did before, I sprayed this panel with a light mist of water just to soften the fibers. Now, this is a heavyweight black cardstock, so I had to make sure that this paper does not crack. I ran the sandwich through my die cutting machine and just take a closer look at this embossed panel. I think it's even more striking than the white panel that we used on card number one. The deep black really makes the texture pop and gives the card that bold, elegant feel. For this card, I used the last remaining smaller frame, and I have to say, I absolutely love the gold cardstock I chose. Against that bold black background, the gold really pops and adds a touch of elegance that I just can't get enough of. Now, for the floral element, I'm using the Magnificent Magnolia dies. I adore this die set. The flowers have that absolutely wonderful keyhole mechanism that makes it so much more easier to layer each petal perfectly, creating a beautiful dimensional floral arrangement. There are four flowers in the set, but for this smaller frame, I'm using just two. To save time, I already cut, ink blended, and assembled the flowers. I used the same surf shade for the petals and citrine for the flower centers, just like we did for card number one, so that the colors tie the two cards beautifully together. Now, once everything was ready, I attached the frame to the textured black background using liquid glue. Then, just like I did for card number one, I used foam tape to pop up the flowers, giving them that perfect lift and dimension against the bold backdrop. I also love how the soft teal looks against that black background. It really stands out beautifully without being too harsh. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What other colors would you pair with black? Do you have any favorite color combinations that work well on black card base? Personally, I usually stick to white backgrounds, so picking colors that work with white feels pretty straightforward to me. But when it comes to black, I'll admit it can get a little bit tricky. That's why I'm so happy that this soft teal shade turned out exactly how I imagined. It really complements the bold black while keeping the card elegant and balanced. For this card, I decided to turn it into a get well soon card, so I chose one of the Better Press sentiment strips that says Feel Better Soon. I trimmed the flagged edges on both sides so it would fit perfectly, overlapping the frame and the background just slightly. Then I added a subtle hint of teal on the sentiment strip to tie all the colors together. Now, all that's left to do is assemble the card front. I popped the panel onto a white top folding A2 size card base using foam tape for some extra dimension, just like we did on card number one. Finally, I added a touch of sparkle to the flowers with my glitter brush pen, just a little shimmer to catch the light and give the card that polished and finished look. And just like that, card number two is also complete. I absolutely love how this turned out. Using black cardstock for the background was a bold choice, but it really made the design pop and gave the card such an elegant, striking look. Well, I'm thrilled with how both the cards turned out, but if I had to pick a personal favorite, I would definitely go for the black one. The combination of gold, black, and teal is so unexpected for me, yet it works beautifully. Stepping out of my comfort zone really paid off. I am so happy with how stunning this card has become. I hope this video inspires you to step out of your comfort zone and try something new in your own card making. All the supplies I used today are listed in the description box below, so you can easily find everything and recreate these cards for yourself. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Are you ready for some holiday sparkle? Because today we are making an interactive window shaker card. This one is extra special and full of festive fun, featuring products from the brand new and everything nice release by Simon Stamp. I can't wait to show you how the shaker window brings the whole design to life. Trust me when I say this one's got all the shimmer, sparkle, and Christmas cheer you could ask for. Well, hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. The holidays are the perfect time to bring out all the shine, sparkle, and of course, a little interactive fun. Today, I'll be creating a festive window shaker card featuring the brand new dies from Simon's Stamps and Everything Nice release. We'll be working with the balcony window dies and the holiday window decor dies, and these two coordinate beautifully. I can't wait to show you how we'll transform these into a gorgeous, festive shaker window that's full of holiday cheer. The best part about these dies is their versatility. You can purchase them individually or as a coordinating bundle. And honestly, they work beautifully with so many other products that you might already have in your crafty stash. Whether you want to create a cozy indoor scene or a festive outdoor view, these dyes offer endless possibilities for mixing and matching. Now, to save us a little time here, I went ahead and prepped all the pieces I'll need to assemble my shaker window, along with some of the holiday decor elements. I've die cut everything using a variety of colored cardstocks to bring in that classic Christmas charm. For the main window, I used a rich brown cardstock. And one of the details I absolutely love about this die is that the window actually opens up. You can choose to lay it flat on your card front to create a lovely layered scene, or like I'm doing today, adhere it to a piece of acetate to turn it into an interactive shaker window full of sparkle and movement. I'll start by working on my background panel, for which I have an A2 sized piece of cardstock. To add a bit of texture and interest, I'm using the A2 postage rectangles die. I absolutely love that delicate postage trim around my card panel. I feel it adds such a charming detail, and when you place it against a beautiful pink cardstock, which is what I'll be using as my card base, it really helps the shaker windows stand out and take the center stage. Next, I'm going to create the window opening for my card. I'm using the same die that I used earlier to cut out my brown window frame, and I have positioned it right in the center of my background panel. Once that die cut, I'll set it aside the white window. It's perfect to save for another project later. Alternatively, if you want to add a little more dimension to your design, you can layer that piece behind the brown window frame. It gives a subtle lift and adds even more depth to the shaker window. Now that my window panel is ready, before we start assembling everything together, I thought it would be perfect time to stamp my sentiment. So I placed the entire assembly onto my stamp wheel. For this card, I'm using the beautiful Merry Christmas sentiment from the Circle Sentiments stamp set by Simon's Stamp. The window die also comes with that little fence like structure. I'm not entirely sure what you call it, but I did go ahead and place my window and the fence temporarily on the panel just to help me figure out the perfect placement for my sentiment. Once I had everything lined up, I stamped my sentiment using black ink to keep it crisp and classic against that soft background. I always like to use my Simon's Stamp grid transparency sheet when aligning my sentiments. I can now peel out this panel from the stamp wheel and we can go to the next step, which is adhering the acetate sheet to create our window. When it comes to adhering acetate or any kind of plastic element to my cards, I always like to use double-sided tape. I usually avoid liquid glue for this step because, in my experience, it can make the acetate feel a bit flimsy and sometimes the glue seeps out of from the edges, which takes away from that clean, crisp finish that we're going for. Using double sided tape keeps everything neat and gives a nice, secure hold. So here I went ahead and added the double-sided tape along all four edges of my window frame, and once that was in place, I peeled off the backing and carefully adhered my acetate sheet right over it to create the clear window for my shaker element. I usually like to trim my acetate sheet a little larger than the actual die cut window. This gives me some extra room to properly align the acetate behind the frame and ensures that everything seals nicely. Having that little bit of overlap also helps prevent any of those tiny shaker bits from sneaking out once the card is assembled, because there's nothing worse than shaker that leaks glitter or sequins. Now that my acetate window is securely in place, it's time to adhere the brown die cut window frame right over it. I'll be using liquid glue for this, and well, yes, I know I mentioned earlier that I usually avoid using liquid glue on acetate, but this one's a bit different. Since the window frame has delicate narrow edges, I'm applying just tiniest dot of glue, being very careful to avoid any of that excess glue that might ooze out. This way we get a nice strong hold without any messy edges showing through the clear acetate. Now before we go ahead and add all the beautiful holiday decor pieces onto the window, let's first create the shaker well. For that I'm using double-sided foam tape. Now, if you want to add extra depth and make room for more shaker bits, you can definitely double up the layers of foam tape. That'll give the shaker more dimension and movement. But for my card, I decided to keep it a single layer. I made sure to run the foam tape all the way around the window opening, sealing every edge completely. This helps the sequins and the embellishments stay contained just around the window area. Now, that way, when the card stands up, you'll still be able to see some of those sparkly shaker bits twinkling through the window, which I think makes it look extra festive and magical. Now, before I remove the backing of the foam tape, I like to run a little bit of that anti-static powder using a paintbrush on the edges of the foam tape. This will make sure that the shaker bits don't stick to the foam tape when you try to move them around. I'm using a purple cardstock for my background, but you could directly adhere this onto your card base as well. If you'd like, you could absolutely take this design a step further and create a little scene inside the shaker window. Maybe add some die cut trees, snow, or even a cozy indoor setup. But for this card, I decided to keep it simple and let the beautiful purple background shine through. I really wanted all the sparkle, shimmer, and festive embellishments to take the center stage and cast the light through the window instead. Now, when it comes to assembling the shaker cards, everyone has their own way of doing it. But here's what works best for me. I like to start by carefully removing the backing from the foam tape first before adding my shaker bits. You can definitely do it the other way around, add your embellishments first and then peel the backing. But I have found that sometimes when you do that, the paper can shift slightly and few of those tiny little sequences or beads might stick to the exposed edges of the foam tape. That's exactly what I try to avoid. So by removing the backing first, I have a clean, ready surface and I can seal the shaker window right away once I add my embellishments. I added a few glitter sequences and some tiny star embellishments inside my shaker window, keeping it light and elegant. Now, once I was happy with the mix, I carefully sealed the window by placing my purple cardstock panel right over the foam tape. If you'd like a fuller look with more movement inside the shaker, you can always double up on the foam tape. That'll give that extra space to add more sequins and beads. Now, the shaker window is all sealed and ready, and it's time to decorate it with a touch of holiday cheer. I started by adhering the little fence piece, which I die cut earlier using black glitter cardstock. It adds just the right amount of sparkle and really frames the window beautifully. Next, I arranged the garlands on both sides of the window to give it that festive, cozy look. Now, here I'm using my reverse tweezers to hold the little tiny pieces of the decor in place, and this helps me to hold everything nicely without my fingers coming in the way. Now, since this piece was really delicate, I had some glue oozing out, for which I like to use my pokey tool, the pointy end, to remove all that excess glue. I cut the garlands using green cardstock and I decided to keep them simple without any ink blending or shading this time. I felt that the clean green tone added a nice pop of color against that purple background. Now, once that was done, I adhered all of these pieces directly onto the acrylic window using small amount of liquid glue, making sure everything stayed neat and secure. And for the final touch, I added those little dots that I cut using pink and purple glitter cardstock to match the purple on the inside of the window and the pink card base. Now I die cut them again using the die that was part of the die set. They add the perfect finishing sparkle and tie the whole festive window scene together so beautifully. I absolutely love how clean and simple this window card turned out. Now, even though the overall design is quite minimal, there's still so much sparkle and shine. From the glitter cardstock details to all those beautiful sequins that catches the light inside the shaker window. It's the perfect balance between the elegant and festive, and I really think the simplicity lets all those details stand out. Now, you could use that remaining white window to create another card. Once my card front was ready, all that was left to do is adhere it onto my pink A2 size card base. I did that with liquid glue. You could also add foam tape if you wanted some extra dimension, but I plan on mailing this card out, so I wanted to keep it as flat as I could with just one layer of foam tape for my window. And just like that, our project is complete. Here's a final look at the finished card. I love how that shaker window adds such a fun interactive touch to a classic holiday design. I had so much fun creating this interactive holiday shaker card using products from the Simon Says brand new and everything nice release. And there are so many beautiful dies and coordinating pieces in this release, perfect for adding festive details, sparkle, and interactive elements to your holiday projects. If you love creating cards that are both elegant and fun, you'll definitely want to check out this release and see all the possibilities for yourself. Now, all the supplies that I used to create this particular card will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Okay, friends, today's project is all about making a statement. Cat Scrappiness just released their brand new word dies, and let me tell you, these are bold, beautiful, and absolutely perfect for creating eye catching cards in minutes. Whether you want a big dramatic sentiment to stand up on its own, or you love pairing it with a main word die with those little sweet sub sentiments, these dies give you endless ways to design quick, simple, and striking cards. I can't wait to show you how these bold word dies instantly elevate any project. Well, hello crafty friends and welcome to my channel. Today we will be taking a closer look at these stunning new sentiment dies designed by Cat Scrappiness, and trust me, they are perfect for making that bold beautiful statements on your cards. We've got two fabulous sentiments in this release. First up is the Howdy sentiment, perfect for your cowboy themed projects or even just a fun, playful way to greet your friends. And then we have Hey Y'all, another great option to switch things up from your usual hi or hello on a card. Both the sentiment comes in two pieces, the main word die, which works beautifully on its own, and also comes with the coordinating shadow die that adds a perfect backing to highlight that gorgeous font on these sentiments. They are bold, they are versatile, and they make sentiment building so much more easier. I also love that these dies come detabbed, which means no clipping them apart and no worrying about those tiny little metal edges poking out, no matter how careful I try to be. It's such a small detail, but it makes crafting so much more easier and so much more safer. Now, both of these sentiments coordinate perfectly with the Cowboy Quokka release, which was one of the previous releases by Cat Scrappiness. And if you've seen it, you'll know that it is packed with the cutest stamps and die sets, gorgeous pattern papers, sentiments, and even die cut ephemera pieces. Now, for my card number one, I'll be using the Cowboy Quokka paper pad along with one of the ephemera pieces, and I will finish it off with that bold Howdy sentiment. This paper pad is absolutely stunning. Every sheet is filled with beautiful designs and a color palette that just works perfectly for so many different styles of cards. There's something so warm and cheerful about it, and I knew right away that I wanted to use it to create a fun little hillside scene. I picked out this gorgeous yellow pattern paper because it has that soft, glowing look that reminds me of the rising sun sky, the perfect backdrop for our Cowboy Quokka theme. I went ahead and trimmed this piece to measure 4 by 5 1/4 inches, which is slightly smaller than a standard A2 size card base. That way, when it's mounted, we'll have that nice even border all the way around the card front, giving everything a very clean and finished look. Next, I picked out one of the green pattern papers from the paper pad to create my hillside. For this, I used the A2 Stitched Hill die by Cat Scrappiness. Now, when you run this die through your machine, you'll actually end up with two pieces, the main hill with that gorgeous stitched detail and the leftover piece. I always keep both because even that extra piece is perfect for another project down the road. Nothing goes to waste in my craft room. Well, for this card, I used the stitched hill as my main element and adhered it along the lower portion of my yellow sky panel using liquid glue. Once it was in place, I trimmed off that excess hanging over the edge with my paper trimmer to get that clean, perfect, and aligned look. Now, if you wanted to, you could absolutely create this entire scene with ink blending on plain white cardstock, blending your sky, your hillside, and building everything from scratch. But I really wanted to show you that you can create beautiful, effortless backgrounds simply by using pattern papers. This is one of those card designs that truly comes together in minutes because not only do you have pattern papers that instantly give you a gorgeous backdrop, but you also have these fun, colorful die cut ephemera pieces that are completely ready to use. All of the cowboy images in this ephemera pack coordinate perfectly with the matching stamp set, which makes everything so cohesive. And honestly, one of the best parts about using these ephemera is how much time it saves. You're getting ready made images that are already stamped, colored, and die cut for you. No extra steps needed. These are perfect when you already have a design in mind or when you want to mass produce multiple cards as with the same layout. All of these images are just incredibly adorable. The coloring, the expression, and the little details, everything is done so beautifully, which honestly made it really hard for me to choose one of them for my card front. I kept going back and forth because all of them would have looked so cute on this scene. To help me decide, I bought in my Howdy die cut and placed it on the upper left hand corner of the panel. That gave me a better idea of how much space I needed to work with on the right hand side and which image would balance the design nicely. In the end, I decided to go with the little girl in the pink. She just fits perfectly as the main focal point of this card, and her colors tie in so well with the soft background and the bold sentiment. For my sentiment, I decided to cut the word howdy from one of the brown pattern papers. Well, I thought it would give the card a nice rustic feel. Of course, you could use craft or plain brown cardstock, but I wanted to show you how you can use pattern paper for your word dies. Off camera, I went ahead and die cut the coordinating shadow piece using black cardstock. Now, at this point, I could have assembled everything and called this card done, but I wanted to add a little sub sentiment below the main die cut word. For this, I'm using the coordinating cowboy quokka sentiment, and if you take a closer look, you'll notice how perfectly the little girl in the ephemera matches the images in the stamp set. Now, for my sentiment, I wanted to stamp the country girl sentiment, which I thought matched perfectly with our focal point image. I placed my panel onto my Altenew stamp wheel. Before stamping, I put down my grid transparency sheet, which will help me align everything perfectly. I also laid down the ephemera and the die cut sentiment to get a clear idea of where I wanted the sub sentiment to go. Once everything was in place, I stamped the sentiment using VersaFine Onyx black ink and then heat embossed it with clear embossing powder. I absolutely love the glossy shine this gives. It really makes the sentiment pops and adds just the right amount of elegance to the card. Now, because this pattern paper isn't as thick as your regular heavyweight cardstock, I recommend keeping your heat gun moving when embossing so you avoid any warping. Once that's done, I like to set the panel aside for that embossing powder to cool down while I assemble my sentiments. Adhering the die cut sentiment over the shadow layer is super easy. I just use tiny drops of glue to adhere them together. Now, since the sentiment is big but delicate, I like to hold it in place with my reverse tweezers to make sure that my fingers don't disturb those tiny little drops of glue. Before adhering any of the elements permanently, I decided to pop up this panel onto an A2 size card base first. Now, this gives us the main dimension for the card, while the sentiment and the focal point image will be directly adhered onto the panel itself using some liquid glue. Now, well, if you like having dimension on your cards, you could definitely pop up the sentiments as well as that little girl. Now, I picked up the die cut sentiment with my reverse tweezers and added some liquid glue at the back and placed it right above the stamped sub sentiment. Now, one of my favorite things about liquid glue is that it gives you a little wiggle room before it sticks, so you can make sure everything is perfectly aligned before committing. Once the sentiment was in place, I used liquid glue again to adhere the little girl die cut ephemera piece on the right hand side of the panel, and just like that, our card is complete. I absolutely love how quick and easy this card came together. It was such a fun and effortless design. With that, we'll move on to card number two, where I'll be using the Hey Y'all sentiment. Now, for this one, I wanted to try something a little bit different. So instead of sticking with the Cowboy Quaker themed products, I decided to go for a fun party themed look. Now, I'll be keeping the overall design similar, using pattern papers as my background, adding a fun die cut ephemera piece, and of course, featuring the new Hey Y'all sentiment front and center. For this card, I'll be using the birthday quokka pattern paper along with Meet the Quokka's die cut ephemera piece. Now, this ephemera pack is packed with so many fun, cute, and absolutely adorable little quokka images. Just like with card number one, I found myself struggling to choose which image to feature as the main focal point for our card. There were just too many adorable options here. After going back and forth for quite some time, I finally settled on that little guy, and he seemed to match perfectly with the beautiful blue pattern paper from the birthday quokka pattern paper, which had that tiny little white polka dot designs on it. Now, this blue paper will serve as the main background for our card. I trimmed it down to measure 4 by 5 and quarter, just slightly smaller than your standard A2 size card base, again to get that clean border once it's mounted on the card base. Now, initially, I had planned to place just the ephemera piece and the sentiment on this panel, but then I thought, why not use this blue pattern paper as a little wallpaper? To add some extra detail, I grabbed a strip of white cardstock to mimic a wall panel, which really gives the card a bit more dimension and interest. Now, for this card, I used just the word die, and we'll not be using the shadow die. And I went ahead and temporarily placed the sentiment in the top right corner of the panel. I also positioned the focal point image and the white strip temporarily just to get a sense of where everything goes, and then adhered the Hey Y'all sentiment directly onto the blue panel using liquid glue. Now, to add a bit more visual interest and dimension to this otherwise flat design, I decided to add some texture to that plain white cardstock strip. One of the easiest way to do this is by scoring. I took the strip over to my scoreboard and carefully scored lines about half an inch apart. This gives it a subtle texture that really mimics the look of a plywood wall paneling. It's a simple detail, but it adds so much more to the overall design. Once I had my lines scored onto this white strip, I adhered the white panel onto the blue background panel. It instantly added depth and broke up all that flatness because we directly mounted the sentiment onto that blue panel. There's no dimension whatsoever. Now, to make everything look polished and finished, I added a thin strip of white cardstock along the edge where the white and the blue panels meet. This little border gives a clean and professional look. Finally, I took my scissors and trimmed off any of that excess hanging over the edges, making sure that all the layers are perfectly aligned. These are the small touches that really elevate the design, giving it that extra dimension and detail without adding too much bulk. It is such an easy way to make a card look more intricate while still keeping the process super simple and fun. For this card, I decided to give the focal point image a little extra dimension, so I popped it up on the card front using tiny foam squares. Now, these are thinner foam squares, so they add lift without creating any extra bulk, perfect for keeping the card nice and smooth and easy to mail. Now, once the focal point was in place, I adhered the entire panel on a top folding A2 size card base using liquid glue. And just like that, our card number two is also complete. I love the Hey Y'all sentiment and how beautifully it pops against that blue background. And I also love the textured white panel, which adds a little bit of that extra detail that makes the whole design come together beautifully. And there you have it, two fun, quick, and easy cards that came together in no time. I absolutely love how the new Cat Scrappiness word dice takes center stage here. They make it so simple to create bold, beautiful sentiments that really stand out whether you're using them on their own or pairing them with sub sentiments for that extra detail. I hope this video inspires you to pull out your word dies and start making bold statements of your own. All the supplies that I used to create these cards will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, if you're looking for a quick and easy way to mass produce your Christmas cards this season, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, I'm working with one gorgeous embossing folder that has the most beautiful holiday detail, and we are pairing it with some simple ink swiping and a delicate Merry Christmas sentiment. We are keeping the overall design clean, elegant, and consistent, but feel free to switch up your sentiment or add a little bit of bling to make it your own. Let's jump right in and start creating. Today, I'm so excited to be playing with this branching holly embossing folder from the latest And Everything Nice release by Simon Stamp. Now, I have to say, I'm completely in love with this folder. It creates the most exquisite impression of twisting branches adorned with those clusters of holly leaves and berries. And well, because it's 3D embossing folder, you get that gorgeous dimensional texture that instantly elevates any card design. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you might remember that I used the same exact embossing folder to create the blackout technique, which gives the most dramatic textured details. But today we are doing something totally different. Now, instead of applying the ink to the debossed areas like we do in the blackout technique, we will be swiping our ink pad right over the raised portions of the design, and the results are so stunning. Just take a closer look at that gorgeous texture from this embossing folder. Whether you ink the raised areas or the debossed side, both give incredible results. The prickly holly leaves, those little berry clusters, and that intricate detail on the branches all come together so beautifully. Now, for my cardstock panel, I'm using a rich maroon shade. Reds and maroons always give me that cozy, nostalgic holiday feeling, from Santa's hat to those bright holly berries. Christmas just feels delightfully red and sparkly to me. That's exactly why I chose maroon for this design, and honestly, maroon and gold go together as a perfect festive pair. Now, I did spritz some water on that maroon panel before running it through the embossing folder. That's because the water will soften the fibers on the paper and it will prevent any cracking or tearing of the paper. Take a look at how gorgeous this design looks, be it the raised embossed side or the reverse debossed side. I would absolutely love using both of these sides to create gorgeous card fronts. The next step in creating this card is to gently swipe our ink pad across the raised areas of the embossed design. You can really use any ink color that complements your cardstock color, but I wanted to bring in that festive touch, so gold it is. At first, I tried the rose gold pigmenting from Altenew. It looked beautiful, but against that rich maroon background, it leaned a bit more copper than I wanted. So I switched to a metallic gold pigment ink pad and lightly swiped it over the entire panel, making sure those raised details picked up all the color. Unlike the blackout technique where I go pretty heavy handed with my ink swiping, this time I'm keeping a much lighter touch. I don't want too much ink on the flat areas of the panel, but honestly, it's not a strict rule here. You'll notice that I do get a few spots of the ink on the flatter areas, and I actually love that effect. It adds a bit of an extra sparkle and gives the panel a slightly vintage, worn in look. I continued swiping the ink pad back and forth until all those raised areas, including the holly leaves, the berries, and the branches, were beautifully coated in that metallic gold color. Once I was happy with the amount of gold on all of those raised areas, I went ahead and added a bit more interest by swiping my ink pad along the edges of the panel. Well, at this stage, I absolutely love this panel, but what's Christmas without more gold in it? Now, when you run the ink pad along the edges, it gives the border a gorgeous gold metallic finish. Now, you don't have to be super precise with this step. There are a couple of ways to do it. You can either gently press or dip the edges of the panel onto the ink pad, or you can do what I'm doing here and simply swipe the ink pad along the edges. Those slightly uneven streaks of gold around the edges actually look beautiful. They tie the whole design together and make it feel much more cohesive than leaving a plain crisp maroon border next to that beautiful rich gold texture. At this point, you can absolutely leave the panel as is. It already looks beautiful, but I wanted to add a little extra sparkle, so I bought in some of that gold distress spritz spray. Now, you could also flick on a few drops of metallic gold watercolors if you prefer, but I was going for an all over shimmer. I gave the panel a couple of light spritz and set it aside to dry while we move on to stamping and die cutting our Merry Christmas sentiment. My go to stamp and coordinating die set for almost any Christmas project has to be the Peaceful Trees set by Simon's Stamp. It's one of their older releases, but I think it came out somewhere around last year, maybe around September. But I reach out to it every single time I'm creating my holiday cards. Now, I stamped the Merry Christmas sentiment onto a piece of black cardstock using clear embossing ink and then added gold embossing powder and heat set it with my heat gun. Now, this is a very delicate sentiment, so you have to make sure that your heat gun is nice and hot before running it through the paper, and also make sure that the heat gun runs over the sentiment and is not focused just at one place. You don't want that powder to over melt because the sentiment is very delicate here. After heat setting the sentiments or any images for that fact, I like to give it a minute or so to cool down before I use the coordinating die to cut it out. I just love how clean and intricate this die cut looks, and it gives the sentiment such a polished and elegant finish. I cut out the sentiment twice using that remaining piece of black cardstock just to add some dimension to the sentiment. Now, if this was a thicker sentiment, I would probably use foam tape, but since this is such a detailed, intricate sentiment, I like to stack multiple sentiments to create that dimensional look. I stacked each layer using liquid glue. You could also use spray adhesive for this, but I feel liquid glue gives more of that wiggle room just to make sure that all of those layers align perfectly. Please excuse all the screaming in the background. My little one was clearly in a very playful mood today, and he's well at a stage where screaming is his favorite form of communication. Anyway, back to our card. My maroon panel is completely dry, and off camera, I also created a second panel using green cardstock. You'll notice in the video how different the gold shows up on the maroon versus the green. Both are gorgeous. You can really use any festive color that speaks to you. Now, I did go ahead and create another sentiment strip by stamping the Merry Christmas sentiment onto craft cardstock. I do have a bunch of these ready in my stash, but I love how the gold embossed sentiment on black cardstock really pops up against that textured background. Now, before adhering the sentiment, I like to pop up the entire embossed panel onto my card base using foam tape. It adds such a beautiful dimension to the finished card. Once the panel is in place, I used liquid glue to attach the Merry Christmas sentiment right at the top center of the card. And as always, I love using my T-square ruler to make sure that everything was lined up perfectly straight. You can definitely add some bling or sequins if you'd like, but I decided to leave these cards just as they are. There's already so much shine and sparkle happening in the background, and since we are mass producing, I like to keep the steps as simple and minimal as possible. This design is super easy to recreate in different colors, and you can always switch up the sentiment. It even makes for a wonderful gift set. Imagine a bundle of 5 or 10 cards that you could gift to your loved ones. Well, here's a look at the finished card, and I absolutely love how this turned out. Off camera, I went ahead and made two more cards, one in green and one in navy blue. Let me know in the comments below which color is your favorite. Well, I had so much fun creating these cards, and they were so easy and simple to create. It took me maybe 10 minutes to create each card, and that was also because I had a lot of die cutting to do with the sentiment stacking, and also the drying time took a little more time. I had so much fun creating these cards. They came together so quickly, and honestly, the only time consuming parts were the die cutting since we stacked multiple layers of the delicate sentiment dies and while waiting for the shimmer spray to dry. Other than that, each card takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes, which makes the design perfect for mass producing. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video and found some inspiration for your own holiday crafting. All the supplies that I used will be listed in the description box below. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hey, crafting crew, are you guys ready to make some Christmas cards? Because today we are skipping the boring flat cards and going full on festive spectacle. We are talking sparkle, we are talking shine, and we are talking about cards so fun your friends will be shaking it all the way to New Year's Day. Get ready for the ultimate interactive Christmas shaker card. Now, this one is packed with tons of colors, layer of stunning details, and generous helping of glitter that's absolutely perfect for the holiday season. If you want to know the secret to making this beautiful, fun, and incredibly shimmery shaker element, then grab your favorite adhesive and let's get crafting. We are diving right into the star of the show, which is this brand new Merry cover die from the latest and Everything Nice release by Simon Stamp, and it is truly designed to make a statement on your holiday cards. What I love about this particular die set is how it instantly creates that bold full panel design that will cover virtually your entire A2 size card base. The primary feature is the word Merry, rendered in that gorgeous large block letters. To start this project, I took an A2 size panel, which is 4 1 quarter by 5.5 inches, and ran it through my die cutting machine with the Merry cover die. As you can see, when I took this panel out of the die, the result is absolutely intricate. We have this beautiful, very delicate outline that defines the word Merry across the panel. Also, we have those large, chunky negative pieces, those big, bold block letters themselves. As I mentioned earlier, those big, bold letters cut by the Mary cover die are wonderful because they offer so much versatility. You certainly could use those pieces separately, maybe stack them up for dimension or adhere them directly onto a different colored background. However, for this specific design, I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I will be inlaying those large block letters right back into the empty spaces of the die cut background panel. This technique gives us a completely smooth surface while allowing us to introduce color in a striking way. But before we drop those pieces back in, we absolutely must add some beautiful vibrant colors to them. Now, since they are currently plain white, I have taken all of the bold Mary letters and placed them onto my Ultra Sticky Mat by Simon. Now, this mat is a lifesaver because it holds all those pieces securely while we get messy with our inking. Now is where the fun begins. We are going to be ink blending some gorgeous saturated red and green holiday colors onto those white letters. I will be using blending brush and alternating my colors across the word. I am giving these letters a bit of an ombre look with lighter shades of those reds and pinks on top of the letter and darker red on the bottom. I'll be starting with the reds and then followed by those gorgeous green for the letters R and E. When you finally see the finished card, you'll notice that the alternating these classic holiday colors creates a beautiful rhythm and makes the entire card look significantly more festive and incredibly pleasing to the eyes. It's a small detail that makes such a huge difference on this card. For all of those beautiful, vibrant ink blending you're seeing here, I have used my Simon's Stamp Positively Saturated inks. I absolutely love these inks and they blend so beautifully to give us that rich, deep color intensity. Now, I will leave a list of all the colors that I use down in the description box below. Next, we will assemble the main framework of our card. I am taking the die cut outline frame, that is a main background piece, and adhering it on top of a standard A2 size white card panel. I'm using a fine tip liquid glue for this step as it gives me a moment to wiggle the frame into perfect alignment before it sets. However, I want to emphasize that you have a few excellent adhesive options here. If you prefer a faster application, you could certainly use a spray adhesive on the back of the die cut frame, or for the easiest method of all, you could cut this entire panel onto an adhesive sheet. That means when you run the die through the machine, the backing of the die cut pieces are already sticky, which would absolutely make this detailed inlay work a lot more quicker and easier to manage. Now, before we get to the satisfying step of inlaying those beautifully ink blended Mary pieces, I decided that this was a perfect moment to add a sub sentiment. Placing it now ensures that it lines up perfectly with the large die cut word. And also, I didn't want to mess it up after all that beautiful inlaying. For this detail, I reached out for a wonderful new die set called the Merry Sentiment Stamp Set, which is also part of this new release. This is a compact 3 by 4 inch stamp set that includes a variety of lovely little words designed to pair flawlessly with the bold Merry text that was created by the cover plate die. After looking through the options, I decided to use the word Christmas. It sits nicely right underneath the word Merry and ties the whole holiday feeling together. I positioned it carefully on the panel and stamped it using my go-to VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This ink gives us the crispest, dark impression possible, ensuring that our sentiment stands out clearly against that beautiful white background. Now for the truly satisfying part. We can finally take those beautifully ink blended die cut letters and inlay them right back into their designated spots on the background panel. Look at how stunning this already looks. The crisp white frame of the cover die provides the perfect clean contrast, looking absolutely gorgeous, surrounding those vibrant colored letters. To adhere these pieces back in place, I am using small dabs of liquid glue on the back of each of those inlay places. The key here is to use a light hand. You want just enough glue to secure the pieces in place without applying so much that it oozes out from the edges when you press it down. Precision is important here to keep our final surface clean. As you place your letters, you really start to see that beautiful effect of their alternating color pattern come to life. I'm so pleased I decided to use two colors, that is, this red and green, instead of just sticking to one single shade. That deliberate alternation really lifts the entire design, giving it a depth and dynamic, festive appearance that is far more appealing to the eye. To start building our shaker element, the fun, interactive heart of this card, I needed to create a shaker well for all the shaker bits to move around. To do this, I went ahead and die cut the Mary cover die frame an additional two times using same simple white cardstock. The exact number of frames you choose to die cut really depends on the final dimension that you're looking for. Even though I'm creating an interactive card design, I personally decided to keep the overall profile on the slightly flatter side, opting for less bulk because I plan on mailing out this card. Therefore, I'll be stacking just two additional frames to create my wells. This decision was also influenced by the choice of shaker material that I was planning to use. Instead of using chunky, large sequin mixes that require a deeper well to move properly, I will be filling my shaker with ultra fine glitter powder combined with some tiny sparkling star sequences. This combination requires less depth but provides maximum sparkle and movement to our final card. Now, the next step in the process is to add our sparkle element into the shaker wells and seal this with an acetate layer. I have an acetate sheet that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, which is the exact same size as the panel. Since the edges of this frame are really thin, I wanted to make sure that the acetate panel covers the entire window so that none of that glitter falls around when the recipient receives our card. To achieve a perfect balance of movement and shimmer, I'm actually using two different sparkle mixes today and placing them strategically, which is something I've never done before. First, I have this beautiful ultra fine glitter mix. I'll be adding this fine powder only inside the wells corresponding to the Mary letters themselves. This fine glitter will settle beautifully and provide constant gorgeous shine and sparkle directly to those words. This is precisely why I opted not to use shimmer spray or mist on that ink blended letters earlier. If I hadn't been creating a shaker card, I would have definitely spritzed them with shimmer spray prior to inlaying them into those wells. Now, I like to use dedicated micro spoons to scoop those very precise and tiny amount of the fine glitter into each of those letter spaces. I then added the star sequences on the outer area surrounding the letters. So when the card is finished, you will have an incredible shaker card featuring two distinct sparkle mixes that are kept separate from each other by the interior walls of our layered cardstock. This separation creates a really dynamic visual effect with fine glitter illuminating the letters and the stars dancing around the perimeter. I then went ahead and sealed this panel using my acetate sheet. I added very little glue to the frame so that none of that glue oozes out, sticking into all that beautiful glitter. After I sealed the panel, I kept something heavy on it just to make sure that everything is in place and the glue dries beautifully. While we were waiting for the adhesive to dry, I decided to work on the decorative top frame for our shaker card. Initially, I had planned on simply using another layer of the same white cardstock for the very front frame. However, this is a Christmas card and it definitely deserves all the glamour that we can give it. I quickly changed my mind and decided to bring in something more sparkly. For the front layer, I chose the gold glitter cardstock from Your Paper Insider. This is an incredible cardstock. I love how deep that shine and the non shedding sparkle it provides. It adds the perfect touch of festive luxury to this entire design. For today's specific project, we will be using only the thin outer frame piece to layer over the shaker window. Just like the previous cuts, I will be saving all those stunning glittery wood pieces for a separate spectacular projects later on. That gold frame is going to finish our card beautifully, tying everything together with that bright, absolutely shiny Christmassy charm. With the gold glitter frame perfectly cut, we can now adhere it onto the shaker window, for which I used thin bead of liquid glue all the way around the back of that delicate frame. I'm careful to avoid all of those outer edges so that the glue doesn't squeeze out. Then I layered the sparkling frame over the sealed shaker, ensuring that the gold outlines perfectly with the die cut underneath. Don't miss to add the inner pieces of the letters R. I made sure that those tiny gold glitter pieces are put back into their respective spots within the letters, which completes the beautiful seamless look of that bold lettering. And just like that, our card is complete. Take a moment and just look at how beautiful this card turned out. The inlaid colors, the dramatic shimmer of the dual shaker elements, and the final touch of festive gold truly makes this design shine. And well, I absolutely love how this turned out. I then adhered this entire assembly onto a top folding A2 size card base using liquid glue, and just like that, our card is ready. This is an absolutely gorgeous, fully interactive, sparkle and shine Christmas shaker card. We took a simple cover die, layered it up with beautifully alternating colors, added that excitement of dual shaker elements, and finished it off with that irresistible touch of gold glitter. This card is truly a gift in itself and is sure to bring a huge smile to whoever receives it this holiday season. Now, if you enjoyed learning these inlay and shaker techniques, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And if you want to see more of festive tutorials, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. All the specific products that I used to create this card today, including the Merry cover die, the little Merry sentiment, and all of the inks, everything will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. Today, I'm diving into a technique that I have never tried before, and honestly, I'm so excited about it. We are creating a faux stained glass background. Yes, that's gorgeous, glossy, dimensional look. Totally inspired by a Jennifer McGuire video that I have been absolutely obsessed with for the past few weeks. You can use this technique with almost any outline die you already have, but I'll be working with this stunning stained glass poinsettia window die by Cat Scrappiness for today's project. Now, I do want to give you a heads up. This is not one of those last minute holiday cards. This beauty takes time between all the coloring, all the glossy accents, and the full day I gave it to dry completely. But trust me, the results are so worth it. And if you use a smaller outline die, this technique becomes much more mass production friendly. Get ready for something unique, eye catching, and totally magical. Let's get right into it. I absolutely love this poinsettia background die. I've used it in so many of my past projects, especially with the die cut inlay technique, cutting different colors of cardstock to build that beautiful poinsettia image and piecing everything back together like a little puzzle. For today's project, I took a different approach. I die cut this frame from four separate white cardstock panels. Since we are adding glossy accents to each of those tiny wells for that faux stained glass look, I really wanted to build up the thickness of the frame. That extra dimension creates deeper wells for glossy accents to sit in, and it makes such a huge difference in the final effect. Now, with the dyes like this, especially the ones with tons of tiny little spaces and delicate details, I love using my dye brush tool by Sizzix. All you have to do is roll the brush right over the dye and it easily pushes out all those tiny little cut pieces. You are left with a perfectly clean, gorgeous frame every time. This tool is a lifesaver for intricate dyes or background designs which have lots of fine elements in them. So here are the four frames that I created using some heavyweight cardstock. Now for techniques like these, I usually prefer heavyweight cardstock because it gives the entire panel so much more stability, especially once we start adding the glossy accent. A lighter weight cardstock can warp or shift, and that's the last thing you want after all that beautiful work. Now, out of the four frames, I went ahead and glued three of them together using liquid glue, and honestly, this part took some time. The design is so intricate that adding glues to all those tiny little areas is definitely a bit of a patience game. You can use spray adhesive or even cut out your panels from adhesive sheets. But when it comes to lining things up, I'm not very confident with either of these options. That's why I prefer liquid glue. It gives me that little wiggle room I need to perfectly align each frame on top of each other. The one frame we kept separate is the one I'm adding directly onto an A2 size cardstock panel. And again, I'm using a heavyweight cardstock here for that extra stability. But you'll notice at the end that even with the heavyweight cardstock, my panel still warped quite a bit. Now, since this is my very first time trying this technique, I definitely still have a lot to learn, especially when it comes to preventing that warping. So, well, if you guys have tried this forced stained glass method using glossy accents before and you have any tips for keeping the paper piece nice and flat, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what's worked best for you. Now it's time to bring in all the beautiful colors. Well, I know it's a little hard to see on camera right now because we are working white on white. But in person, it's actually really easy to color in all those tiny little sections. And at this stage, it's completely fine if your marker goes over the edges or overlaps into the frame. Don't worry about staying perfectly inside the lines. We are going to cover this entire frame with the stacked trio of die cut frames we glued together earlier, so none of that overlap will show in the final result. For coloring itself, I'm using my Uhuhu alcohol markers and I specifically chose brush tip markers because some of those spaces are quite large and the brush nib makes it super quick and smooth to fill it in. I decided to stick with the traditional holiday colors. We have some rich reds for the poinsettia petals, vibrant greens for the leaves, and pretty blue to create the background that really makes everything pop. To add a little more depth and dimension, I used two shades of each of those color families. Layering the lighter and the darker tones gives the final stained glass effect so much more richness once the glossy accents go on top. Even though this steps takes a little bit of time, it is one of my favorite parts because you really start to see the image come together. So at this stage, I'm simply coloring inside all of those open areas. You will probably notice that I'm getting marker all over the white die cut outlines, and that's totally okay. In fact, this part is supposed to look messy. None of that extra color on the frame is going to matter because, like I said, we'll be adding the stacked die cut frames right on top, and that will completely hide any overlapping or stray marker lines. All you really need to focus on here is getting solid color on every open space of the design. Now, I'm using alcohol markers because that's what I had on hand and they work beautifully for this type of coloring, and that's what I'm more comfortable with. But honestly, you can use whatever medium you prefer, be it watercolors, regular markers, or even color pencils. If you didn't want to color each individual section, another option would be to do some ink blending on this entire white panel before adding your die cut frame. There are a lot of ways you could do this. You could even skip coloring altogether and just do like what I have done in my previous videos where I did die cut inlay. You could cut uh, some solid colored cardstocks, inlay this design, and then add your glossy accents. But since I really wanted that classic stained glass effect, coloring each section with simple, clean colors felt like the best way to achieve that look. It gives the final piece such a beautiful feel once that glossy accent goes on top. As much as I love doing the inlay die cut technique, I feel it would take much longer for a background this large. Inlaying every single tiny little piece, especially on a design with so many sections, would turn up into a very intensive project. But if I were working with a smaller outline die, I would absolutely want to try creating a true stained glass look using actual inlaid die cut pieces instead of coloring all these sections. Once all the coloring is complete, I'm bringing in the stacked die cut frame we created earlier, and I'm simply placing it right on top of this main colored panel. This part is actually very easy. These frames line up beautifully, so you really shouldn't run into any issues getting everything perfectly aligned over the colored areas. Just like before, I'm using liquid glue for this step. It gives me a little wiggle room to shift things into place and make sure that the frame sits exactly where it needs to be. Now, once everything is pressed down, you can already start to see that gorgeous background shining through. Honestly, if I weren't doing the stained glass technique today, I would stop right here. A simple sentiment strip on top of this colorful panel with the crisp white frame would make an absolutely stunning card all on its own. The colors look so vibrant, and that white frame really makes them pop. I did give the panel a couple of minutes to let the glue set before moving on to the glossy accents. Now, glossy accent is a 3D clear gloss medium and it has so many uses. You can use it as an adhesive for things like sequences, even on tricky surfaces like fabric or felt, because it dries crystal clear and holds everything securely. I also use it a lot on my winter themed holiday projects. I add a layer of glossy accents and then sprinkle white glitter powder on top to create snowy banks or sparkly Christmas tree branches. Once it dries, it looks like fresh, glittery snow sitting right on top of your project. But for today's card, we are using glossy accents to fill each of those open wells in the frame. And this right here is definitely the most time consuming part of the entire process. You're essentially filling each section like a tiny window pane, but the end result is absolutely worth every minute. Now, when you first apply, the glossy accents will look cloudy or milky, but don't worry, that's totally normal. As it dries, it becomes completely clear. If you notice any bubbles forming while you're adding it, you just use a pokey tool and gently move the bubbles around to pop it. You can even blow on it, it'll break the surface. Now, once it dries, you're left with a beautiful glassy shine every time. Now, typically on my other projects, I only need to let the glossy accents dry for an hour or so because those layers are very thin. But for this project here, we are working with 4 stacked frames, which means each is much deeper than the regular cards that I would create. That thicker layer of glossy accent is going to need significantly more drying time, almost a full day in my case. Here you can see I'm using the pokey tool to gently move the bubbles around and break them. It's such a simple step, but it really helps make each section dry perfectly smooth. And just take a closer look at that beautiful shine. Right now the glossy accent looks a little milky and cloudy, but don't worry, it'll dry completely clear. I set my panel aside for almost an entire day and let everything cure properly. Even with that heavyweight cardstock giving the panel extra stability, you will see that this has warped quite a bit. This is definitely one area where I'd love your suggestions. If you have any tips or tricks to prevent warping at this stage, please drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear how you tackle this problem. But don't you think this panel looks absolutely gorgeous? That beautiful shine and the glass effect is exactly what we were looking for. Now, even though we have 4 layers of stacked frames, I decided to use foam tape to adhere the panel onto my card base. Now, this is a little trick I often use when working with embossed panels or panels that are slightly warped due to heat embossing. The foam tape won't completely straighten the warp panel, but it does give it a little extra stability and makes it sit nicely on a card base. I attached the panel on top of an A2 size top folding card base, and for my sentiment, I stamped and heat embossed a beautiful frame. This is from the Vintage Holiday Swag stamp set by Simon's Stamp, which says, "May the season bring warmth to you and yours." Now, I absolutely love this stamp set because it has those beautiful floral images, and also it has some beautiful scripty holiday sentiments that you could use on your projects. To make that sentiment pop even more, I stacked 2 pieces of black cardstock behind the strip before adhering it to my faux stained glass frame. And with that, here's a look at the finished card. The colors, the shine from the glossy accents, and the layered frame all come together for that true magical holiday look. This technique definitely takes some time, but the end result is so worth it, and it's such a fun way to make your holiday cards truly unique. Now, all the supplies that I used to create this card will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more card making tutorials, tips, and holiday inspiration. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.